Welcome to Ephemera. I am fantasy author Katie Brisky.
And I'm editor Jen R. Albert. We hope you're enjoying our theme music, courtesy of Alex White. Welcome to anybody joining us for the first time, and welcome back to those who have visited us before in our virtual home. For those of you who are new, Ephemera is an award-nominated reading series chaired by Katie and myself.
Pre-COVID, we held events in the Glad Day bookshop, and while we await our triumphant return and their delicious cauliflower bites, we are honored to hold our birthday festivities with you right here on YouTube. And we would like to begin tonight by acknowledging that the land on which I live and work is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. This land is covered under Treaty 13 and is part of the Dish with One Spoon. Tonight we celebrate 2 years of Ephemera, and I think back to our very first event held in the Glad Day bookshop on a very particular piece of land. The land on which we met then is named Tikaranto, a Mohawk word translating to where there are trees standing in the water. Not a reference to the Toronto Islands, then a peninsula, but to fishery weirs in Lake Ontario constructed by the Haudenosaunee. And I'd like to talk about Treaty 13, which you've heard us reference every month for the past 2 years. The first Toronto Purchase Treaty between the Crown and the Mississaugas reportedly dates to 1787, but it was bad enough that even the colonizers admitted its illegality, and another agreement, Treaty 13, was negotiated in 1805. In 1998, the Mississaugas of the Credit filed a claim against the Canadian government, claiming that the Crown had unlawfully acquired more land than had been agreed upon. The Toronto Purchase Claim and Brant Tract Claim were settled in 2010 for a compensation of $145 million. But nonetheless, settlers have stolen and benefited from Indigenous lands, including the lands on which Ephemera met. In 1787, in 1998, in 2019, and in 2021, and alongside a climate crisis sparked by settler capitalism already in full swing. As we said 2 years ago, land acknowledgements are good first steps. But how do we move from acknowledging the land to giving it back? Land back is Indigenous self-determination and consent. It's equity and sharing land and resources, and it's a key component of reconciliation. I hope that we hold our 3rd birthday celebration at Glad Day on that land, and I challenge you to join those festivities, having worked to abide by your treaty responsibilities if you live on land covered by one, and having walked further in your own path to reconciliation. Thank you, and a reminder to everyone that our code of conduct is posted online. If this is your first event, please check it out on Twitter or Facebook. And if you're so inclined, you can still feed Fred the physically distanced donation dragon. You can find the link to our Ko-fi at the top of the channel. Near our banner, there's a small icon up there. You can also check it out on our Twitter or Facebook page. And the link, if you just want to pop on over, is ko-fi.com/ephemera reading series. So exciting news! Tonight is our 2nd birthday. To celebrate the occasion, we've put together some fun, some frolic, and a birthday surprise or two. To kick off events, I'm pleased to introduce our first reader. Rebecca Campbell is a Canadian writer and teacher whose speculative fiction has appeared most recently in the year's best science fiction and Clarkesworld. Her work has won the Sunburst and Theodore Sturgeon Memorial Award and has been nominated for the Aurora Award. Nia West Press published her first novel, The Paradise Engine, in 2013, and in 2022 Undertow Publications will publish her first World War horror novella, The Telesite. She mostly uses her PhD in Canadian literature to make up sad futures and weird fictions. Welcome, Rebecca. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. I am ridiculously excited to be part of this. I had to think a lot. Oh, first, I should continue my thanks to anybody listening. I know that there are so many demands in our time, and there are a bazillion electronic events you could have been invited to. So I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased that you're choosing to listen to us tonight, and it's a real pleasure to be here. So thank you. So I had to think a lot about what to read tonight. I realized that much of my work isn't party-ish. There's not a lot of festivities in my stories. And then I've been glued to the news for the last couple of days. I grew up in the southwest coast of British Columbia, and so I've been watching the places that I know very well slowly be covered with water. So I'm going to read from a news story. I had a novelette out last year in Clarkesworld called An Important Failure, and I'm expanding that world into a novella. So I'm going to read a little bit from that. It's called Arboreality. And this is from one section called Controlled Burn. So as I say, I don't know how festive this is, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, thank you for listening. Bernard started in a corner of his yard where the grass was already dead from the watering van and dug up the surface invaders: plantain and Queen Anne's lace, yellow toadflax. When the season changed, he'd plant closely Oregon grape, both tall and dwarf varieties, salal, wild dwarf roses for the shade. Toward the middle of the yard, he would add a Gary oak sapling from the nursery on the highway and doing some gardening. Jim from across the way, he'd finished cutting his lawn. Yep. Jim waited, then said, "How's Jen?" The silence stretched thinner. "Bernie?" Bernard opened his mouth, closed it. Who wanted to talk about that? "Okay, well, I'll let you get to it," Jim finished. Bernard drove the shovel deeper into the grass, turning over another clod and revealing what lay beneath them all, the dense clay of the hillside, like a rock in this weather, cracked right through. Another shovel, another turn, and he felt something inside him shift. Maybe the bursitis in his right shoulder, acting up, maybe his heart. With Jim, there were well-defined topics that were appropriate. Good news about kids, bad news about the municipality, real estate prices rising or falling. The price of gas was veering too close to the world's real problems. So after expressions of mild shock, they avoided it and returned to issues like the state of the grass, the proliferation of Douglas fir beetles, brittle needles all over the road every windstorm. "Premiums going up," Jim said. "They are, yeah. Twice what they were last year, and not covering floods. Well, the river." Jim deadheaded a begonia. "No one can afford to rebuild in Bear Mountain. Municipality is talking about withdrawing services anyway." "No, they can't. That's a provincial decision. They can't just arbitrarily redraw their own borders." The Cook Sile of Fire took it out of everyone. "Well, I pay taxes." Jim deadheaded another begonia. That flower had looked brilliant and fresh, with only the faintest sign of wilt on its outside petals, a luminous, unnatural coral color. Jim hauled water in from work to keep his begonias, his impatience, brilliant in the dry heat, even when the air was full of ash and the evening sky a dull sepia. He cut the lawn on Saturdays using an immaculate riding mower, first parallel with the curb, then at a precise 45-degree angle from corner to corner. He edged it and sprayed for weeds, and then Bernard had seen this, he was sure. He stopped for a moment before he pulled the mower into the garage and was satisfied, a dream fulfilled briefly in the late afternoon, despite the black grit floating down the mountain and dulling the shine on his cars. Bernard watched the weekly ceremony, entranced by the precision and surprised by the pleasure they both took in the lawn each summer. its luxuriance and its softness underfoot. It looked like someone's dream of a lawn. It looked like a postcard of an ideal street in a town that had never existed. Greetings from Cowichan. Meanwhile, his own was a mess. Dead clay in the corner he always cut when he pulled into the driveway, and a flurry of dandelions heads nodding above the grass. When she was little, his daughter Octavia had loved Jim's lawn, and he could almost see her running across it and into the backyard where she'd screamed on the trampoline. Octavia, barefoot and tangle-haired, a wild girl running to keep up with Jim's daughter, Carolyn. Where had Carolyn gone? Toronto, maybe? Or one of the palladium mines on James Bay. Years ago, he'd seen her pack her bags into Jim's SUV on the way out to the airport, waving awkwardly because Octavia had already left by then, leaving everything behind her awkward. Jen had hugged her and slipped her a coffee card for the road. He was 67, the year the Cowichan River flooded, a century flood, worse than the previous year's century flood. And they permanently ceded the village to the water, towing away the remaining float homes, but leaving the art galleries, the pottery studio, the ice cream shop. He followed the road to the estuary and saw the eroded edge of cultivation where the water had undercut the pavement and the old fields of corn were inundated with salt. He thought about fish and chips and cheap beer in the hotel 40 years before, back when they didn't card you and you could get Labatt's Blue for cheap while watching the sunset. The end of a day out on the water, a friend's dad's boat, a sunburn, underage cigarettes, sitting on a traffic barrier, girls in flip-flops walking down to rent a movie at the corner store, looking over their shoulders through their hair and laughing. No one, he realized, not a single one of the kids he saw in town would ever have that, stupid as it was, those tiny moments of cigarettes and illegal booze and Friday the 13th on VHS. He walked home slowly and dug another trench and planted a row of Oregon grape he'd been babying on the windowsill all winter. After the Delacourts left, the Fremantles followed, and the Taberners, and the Irvines, and the Moorheads. In the winter of 2052, a landslide blocked the highway, both north and south, for 3 months. That was the last time he had hydro. The nights were so still he could hear fish jumping in the river if he listened carefully. And when someone did start up an engine, maybe a chainsaw, the wine drew him out into his front porch in the misty hour, straining his ears for that homely sound, conjuring in his heart the smell of diesel exhaust and sawdust. He downloaded Wikipedia back when it was a manageable 20 terabytes. And at night, if he'd successfully charged his old battery, he'd troll through that other world, reading about cities now drowning and people long dead, and wondering about the kids he heard sometimes, glimpsed in the distance, but did not disturb, walking out from the reserve on Suhalem Road. He wondered how small the world had grown for them, how much wilder. When the world ends, you might lose track of important things, your wife's ashes, your daughter's location. It is important that when the world ends, you are close to those you love and can reach out and touch them as the universe shrinks to a valley, a street, a room. A long time ago, the light hit the far reaches of the world, the dark side of the planet, which hummed even at night with people, with phones that would ring if one dialed their numbers and voices answering in laughter or silent resentment, but at least answering. Since then, that brilliant world has begun to draw in until it is only what you can see with your naked eye, climbing the highest point of land to look into the next valley or over the islands. The light contracts, the distance recedes, and while you might trust the maps you remember, that world no longer exists. The sea levels are rising, the torrential winter downpours blow out roads and swell rivers. The map has changed. The deserts have expanded and the lowlands are abandoned. Who knows what Venice looks like or Jakarta? Who knows what's happening in New Orleans? You can only see an eagle circling, diving for a Chinook fighting upstream in the Cowichan River, having dodged the hungry pods of orcas, the flotillas of sea lions who wait at the river's mouth. Thank you.
Oh, Rebecca, that was so poignant, especially in light of what's been happening out west. Thank you so much for bringing that to us this evening. I also absolutely love how the landscape and the setting is a character.
It's so hard. It's so hard to be, because I'm in Ontario right now, and
can
all I
imagine.
can do is look at all the images my friends are posting and my family. And there's such a concentration of people I love in that little patch of land between Seattle and Victoria and Vancouver. Like, so many
Yeah.
people.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, and it's
But-
such a precious part of the world, but all parts of the world are precious. So
Yeah, well, I think we really saw it in the piece you just read. So thank you again for sharing that with us tonight.
well, thank you again for having me.
Yeah.
It was an absolute pleasure.
Yay! Well, that was a wonderful way to start off this evening and to lead us into our first birthday party game of the night. Wouldn't be a party without party games. And this one is a favorite at dorm rooms and dinner parties alike. Pictionary.
Oh, Pictionary. But well, we're not at a dinner party, we're physically distanced.
But we have imagination. Audience, you can put your suggestions for a word in the YouTube chat. Jen will pick one and draw it, and then I'll try to guess what it is. And I promise that I won't peek.
Okay, please go easy on me. I'm not good at this.
So you can pop your easy suggestions for Jen in the chat, maybe party related words. I don't know. Again, I'm not going to look because I need to introduce tonight's performer. Alison Grower is an author, actor, and podcaster based out of Chicago. Her first novel, On the Isle of Sound and Wonder, is a steampunk Shakespeare retelling. Her voice can be heard on such podcasts as Skyjacks, Courier's Call, the Apex Magazine podcast, and A Night of Shreds and Patches. Find her at dreamstobecome.com or on Twitter and Instagram at dreamstobecome. Oh, wait, sorry, hold on. Oh, one sec, this is urgent. Yes, this is Ephemera. Oh, okay. Thank you for telling me. You too, thank you. It seems that Ali will not be performing at tonight's Ephemera. Instead, we're very pleased to welcome Dooley Cold Tea. Dooley Cold Tea is an associate archivist of the library in the world famous Imagimansion. A former minor league muse of inspiration, her recent projects include fine-tuning aspects of low-level interdimensional travel through minor sensory experiences. Welcome, Dooley. Thank you for joining Ephemera.
Hello?
Hello. Yes.
Hello?
Yes. Are you there across the interdimensional low-level travel?
It's Ephemera? Oh
It's
my goodness.
Ephemera.
Hang on. I'm so sorry. The time zones, you know. Hello. Yes, I'm Dooley Cold Tea. How are you?
Well, thank you. I mean, we're in the middle of our party. Dooley,
I'm terribly sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. I confess though, I'm a little embarrassed. I'm actually not very familiar with the world famous Imagimansion.
Oh,
can you just kind of fill me in on what I was expecting, Ali? So can you just fill me in on what that is?
Oh, well, she's part of that. That's the whole thing. Yes. So Allie is she is one half of Whimsy and Artifice, which you're familiar with, I'm sure. It's a world building and imaginative, creative. And she is one half of that. She's the Whimsy and the Whimsy and Artifice. And together they have the Imagimansion, which is where the library is, among other things. You've been, haven't you? I'm sure you have.
I mean, I must have at some point.
The galleries, the tea room, the pool.
Remind me what's in the library exactly? Like, I can't quite picture it.
Oh, there's so many things in the library. It's really, you know, all of those ideas that you have right before you've fully woken up.
Yeah.
Most of them are there.
So when I say I should really write that down because it will make a good story and I don't, it goes to your library.
It does. And then I have to sort it.
Oh, I should really write them down more. Miss Colty, how did you hear about Prancy's birthday?
Everyone knows about Prancy's birthday. Everyone's been talking about it for weeks. I mean, it's not every day that someone you know gets an invitation to an an eldritch servid's birthday party, and an elder eldritch servid, to be sure, since Prancy is turning 2, aren't they?
He is turning 2. Yeah, the terrific 2s. We're all for it.
It's a massive accomplishment. So naturally, as soon as that invitation came through the doors for Allie, I made sure that she was busy tonight. I'm just such a fan. You know, Prancy is such a cornerstone of the Eldritch Servid community, and I've done so much research and really, you know, I think that I hesitate to say that there's a missing link situation, but if there was, it would be Prancy. And I just, is he coming to the party?
Oh yeah, he's on his way. Tell me about your research though. Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, you know, there is so much in history and in whatever the opposite of history is that hasn't happened yet. There's so much out there for uncertain, creepy, eldritch, ephemeral, if I may borrow the word, and imaginative reconfigurings of Cervidae and different subsets therein. There are some people that argue that they're linked in some way, you know, not genetically, but the opposite of that. Linked in some way to the whole mythological family tree that belongs to unicorns as well. There's something about the antlers, you know.
Did you know that some deer can grow a third antler out of their eye socket?
I did. I think it's great.
Isn't that cool?
I love that. I love that so much. But yes, so there's, I mean, and if you really, I'm spending so much time in the library as I do, I've read so many fragments and impressions of strange deer, different sizes, different shapes, different colors, different levels of skin and musculature in Prancy's case, that have just sort of echoed throughout the imagination for ages. And I've been sort of tracking those patterns, you see.
Well, I want to say at this point, audience, if you also have questions for Dooley Coldteeth, librarian, archivist, and eldritch deer expert, feel free to pop them in the YouTube chat. But while you're thinking, you know, I have more questions.
Oh, please.
Well, I mean, it sounds like working in the library, you're very familiar with like different stories and literature. So like I'm a writer and trying to take my writing to the next level. And I think that's true for many of the people in the audience as well. So like, what's your advice? The writer's just trying to, get to that next level of storytelling.
So the thing about levels is your perception of them is not the same as other people's perception of them. Someone else might have a completely different perception of what the next level might mean for them or for you, and vice versa. But I guess what I would say is whatever the next level is for you, it lies deeper within yourself than you realize. The more you can make something, the stronger it gets. That's what I found in all of my readings of impressions and dream fragments and daydream fragments, even for that matter, which are different, you know.
Oh, it's not leveling up; it's leveling into you.
Yes.
Wonderful. And you know, this obviously is a public reading series. I wondered if you had any advice for those of us maybe giving a reading.
Giving a reading tonight, or in general?
In general. Like I know I had to give a reading earlier this year. Some people here, it's their very first time. People in the audience may want to give a reading one day. So what advice would you have for someone who is beginning their journey of reading their works aloud?
It can be very vulnerable, can't it? It can be very vulnerable and the opposite of comfortable sometimes. But as Rebecca just proved, once you begin, it flourishes. Once you begin, the audience is already there for you. That's half the battle. Once you begin, it unfolds. You know, it's like one of those old-timey wallets with everybody's family pictures in it. Just all the way out, right? So when you're writing, it's the opposite of what I just told you. When you're writing something and you want it to go to the next level, you go in. And when you're sharing that writing with someone else, you go out, and it takes off. So I suppose my main piece of advice would be to take a deep breath and let it take flight.
You've got such wisdom collected in the library of the Imagine Mansion.
It's just fragments of wisdom. It's not whole thoughts.
I mean, Is that not what wisdom is? Just fragments of thoughts collected from different dimensions and stitched together like
that's
a quilt.
true. Yes, I suppose that is true.
So what sorts of stories do you like to read?
All sorts, except for the boring ones.
Well, yes, goes without saying.
In general, I would say I find myself, well, when I'm not researching the Eldritch Cervidae, I do find myself drawn to intriguing new fragments that reflect strange creatures of some kind. Could be monsters, if you want to use that label, could be frightening things, could be charming, sweet things, anything that's sort of a new combination of things that I haven't seen before. You know, there was a long time in human history where people loved to combine animals to create new monsters, right? Like that's how we got the cockatrice and the manticore and all sorts of other things like that, the chimera, all sorts of things. Love to copy paste different parts of animals together, right? To create something frightening or exciting or something dramatic that a knight could fight in a battle. I'm always interested in seeing those, especially in modern times. I don't think we have enough of those.
Well, maybe you can answer this question that's come in from the audience then.
Oh, yes.
Are deer with eye antlers related to babirussas, those pigs whose tusks pierce their snouts and sometimes even their skulls?
Yes. So as far as I have gathered, they are linked. I have met several babirussas actually in recent years. And although they haven't given me a confirmation one way or another, I mean, we as historians naturally have to continue to draw our own conclusions, don't we? We're not always going to get the official go-ahead from somebody who was there. But the babirussas are wonderful. They really are very, very traditional people, the babirussas. And I think that really does show a reflection in the traditions of different cervidae, elk, moose, you know, antelope, things like that. Yeah, it's a large family.
I don't want to keep you too much longer. But Miss Dooley, I wonder if you can answer one more also animal related question for us.
My pleasure. Yes.
So I'm afraid this is not an animal from the Cervidae family. In fact, not even a mammal. But perhaps one that you still might know something about. If you had to choose, just for personal preference, gators or crocodiles?
Gators.
Oh, and what? That was very definitive, Miss Dooley. Why gators?
Well, I do give you points for understanding that there is a difference. The words are used so interchangeably in modern context, and it's really quite embarrassing.
If you've been to Gatorland in Orlando, Florida, you'll know they're very different things.
You would know. Yes, you would know.
Yes, you would know.
I just think, well, from a personal standpoint, they're cuter.
Yeah,
they are.
They have blunter snouts, and they hold each other's claws. Yeah.
Crocodiles are what I would imagine one would put in a moat around one's evil-doing lair. You know, gators are what you might put in the front lawn to protect your children.
Right. They're really the reptile of your heart.
Truly.
Well, what an inspiring note to end on. I'm sure Prancy will be along for his birthday party momentarily, so I will let you get back to it. But thank you again for joining us this evening. Dooley cold tea.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll be over here.
Do tell Allie that we hope she's come soon.
Oh, she's fine. She's
okay.
Just reading.
Of course.
You know.
Well, that was most enlightening. I feel like I've learned a lot. And I also think I am ready to see this Pictionary masterwork.
Masterwork is right.
Let's see it.
Yeah, I wonder if you can guess.
Oh my goodness, is it Prancy?
Yes.
Is it birthday Prancy?
It's birthday Prancy. That was really quick. I had a lot of time to draw it actually, and that was the best I could do.
It's really good. Hold it up again actually, because that's really
so Prancy did come to his birthday party.
There you go, Dooley Coldwater would be so pleased.
Forgot what
no, that's really good.
Antlers look like. One's a moose and one's a deer.
No, they look fantastic.
Wow. Okay.
In fact, that was so fantastic. I think we should have a second game. In this one, we'll be placing one word in a book title with the word birthday. So for example, You might have This Is How You Lose the Birthday War, or perhaps a song for a new birthday. Or to use an example from our absent guest, on the Isle of Sound and Birthdays. So we can't wait to share what you come up with in this delightful party game. You can put your contributions in the YouTube chat, or you can tag us on Twitter.
And for now, it is my great pleasure to introduce our next reader. Erin Rockfort is an Ottawa-based writer, blogger, and podcaster. She has an upcoming story in the Translunar Travelers Lounge and co-hosts the podcast, The Bodacious Book Club. When not writing, she can be found at her day job, poking metaphorically at brains and playing video games badly. Erin, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Jen. Yeah, pleasure to be here. I'm going to be reading from a as yet unpublished short story called Lichen Therapy, and I was realizing as I reread it sort of in practice for this that it does begin with a little bit of mild body horror, so I guess just a content warning for that. But yeah, without, I guess, any more ado, I will start that. 20 minutes until moonrise. Rafe pushed through the snowy Ottawa streets, skin itching beneath his jacket. He had time for one last stop, the last clinic on his list. Despite the chill, sweat gathered on his brow and shame burned beneath his ribs. As he pushed through the clinic doors, the discordant mess of scents and sounds nearly overwhelmed him. His blood raced in his veins, his bones seemed to shift beneath skin. Stiffly, Rafe laid out his business cards on the nearest counter. Rafael Santoro, MA, registered psychotherapist. Hopefully, this would bring in needed clientele. A butch-presenting woman approached him. You all right? Fine, Rafe managed, giving her a strained smile as he shouldered past. His 20 minutes were nearly up. Back on the street, the icy November winds cooled his feverish skin. He shouldn't have pushed it. Still, he chafed against the way his life became defined by his condition, or rather, the condition. Externalization, like he taught clients, separating the problem from his identity. Unfortunately, externalization only went so far. Rafe stopped and closed his eyes, digging his lengthening fingernails into his palms. A couple blocks to the nearest park, and then he could change in peace. Opening his eyes, he startled to see the woman from the clinic in front of him. He hadn't heard her approach, and his overstimulated mind found this fundamentally wrong. Somehow, this woman registered as a threat, and he the cornered animal. His body spasmed in panic as adrenaline flooded his system, like he'd slipped on ice. The shock snapped his tenuous hold on the change, and flail as he might, he could not regain his balance. Get away, he growled through teeth suddenly too large for a human mouth. The transformation twisted his spine, bending him in half. The woman stepped closer, concern writ clearly on her brow. Her mouth moved, but Rafe had gone beyond understanding. His limbs elongated. Fur burst from beneath his skin. Spurred by instinct, he lunged for the woman, claws outstretched, and then darkness. Rafe's next moment of awareness found him awakening in an unfamiliar bed, bathed in golden sunlight, reverted to human form. He attempted to sit up, only to have pain pin him in place. The change always took its toll, though it had been some time since he'd been hit so badly. Memories returned to him slowly, and his stomach began to churn with shame and anxiety. He'd never heard anyone before, but he couldn't recall how the confrontation had ended. Groaning, Rafe pushed himself upwards. As he paused to catch his breath, the door opened to reveal an unfamiliar young woman. She looked exceptionally normal, in a beat-up pair of overalls and a turtleneck, with little white and yellow flowers woven through her hair. With a smile, she said, "Hey, take it easy." "Where am I? Who are you?" She stepped closer, wafting an earthy, herbal scent into his sensitive nose. "I'm Karia. How much do you remember?" Hesitantly, he asked, "Did I hurt anyone?" Karia's eyes shot up. "Oh, no, don't worry about that." But he remembered the panic so clearly. Perhaps she didn't know about the condition. Sensing his misgivings, Karia said, "Why don't you come with me? That may explain things." She extended her hand and Rafe let her help him up. Pain lanced down his legs, then faded to a duller ache. Leaning on her for support, they exited into an expansive hallway. Rafe noticed that all the hallway windows had their blinds pulled tight, and his unease increased. I'd really like to know where I am, he said, struggling to keep his voice calm. You're safe, she replied soothingly. Nobody's going to hurt you. Rafe twisted away from her grip, frustrated. That's not... Pain spasmed up his spine and he crumpled to the floor. Karya reached for him again and he snapped, Don't touch me. She nodded, tucking her hands into her pockets. Okay. She had the greenest eyes he'd ever seen. Karya? Rafe turned his head to see the woman from the clinic, whole and uninjured, her short red hair still perfectly coiffed. He took his first full breath of the day, relief flowing through him. Still, the shame remained. Normal people didn't have to worry about accidentally mauling bystanders. Is he bothering you? She asked. Her voice held the slight nasal curl of a Quebec accent. He's confused, Karya replied, giving the other woman an exasperated look. You didn't have to hit him quite so hard. The other woman shrugged. Even in the light of day, Rafe's senses picked up a distinct message of danger from her. With his brain working properly, he could determine that she smelled like iron and old parchment. More importantly, he knew what that smell meant. He sighed. If you're going to eat me, at least make it fast. The vampire grinned, a disconcerting flash of teeth. Not big on small talk, then? Stop that, Karya told her, then turned back to Rafe. Nobody's going to eat you. Rafe attempted to stand, only to be felled once more by pain. At this point, it might be a kindness. The vampire laughed. I like this one. Envoy, we've Advil somewhere. She offered her hand, and after a moment's consideration, Rafe took it, trying not to be visibly unsettled by how easily she lifted him. As they moved down the hall, Karya leaned down to kiss the vampire on the cheek, earning herself a soft smile in response. Rafe averted his eyes, embarrassed and a little jealous. His last relationship had ended badly, his ex-boyfriend finally losing patience with Rafe sneaking out at night and keeping secrets. He had been unable or unwilling to explain that sometimes he needed to go howl at the moon. The vampire led them to a kitchen that appeared set in the aftermath of a war between expensive appliances and potted plants. The plants had won. She parked Rafe in a chair, and Karya slid him a glass of water and 2 extra-strength Advil, which he downed gratefully. Breakfast? Asked the vampire. I think we have eggs. Before Rafe could answer, a newcomer entered the kitchen. He bowed nervously, shot an odd look at Rafe, and said, My lady, I have the head of the Beaumont family on the phone. They're threatening war against the Winterborns. Vampire feuds in Ottawa, really? Rafe asked, eyebrows raised. The newcomer glared at him. You dare mock Queen Antoinette? An awkward silence fell over the kitchen. Rafe dropped his head into his hands. Oh my God. The vampire queen, Jesus Christ, pinched her nose. Tell the Beaumonts I'll call them in an hour. This is what I get, Rafe said mostly to himself as the newcomer left. Vampire queen in my city, and I never even knew. The vampire queen made a disgusted noise. I hate that title. Antiquated nonsense. Karya rolled her eyes. Rafe, in the clutches of unreality, asked, What would you prefer, vampire prime minister? I prefer Tony. Eggs? Sure. Don't you need to deal with that? Not urgently, the vampire, Tony, replied with a wry look, reaching for a frying pan. The Beaumonts like to make a fuss. Billy Winterbourne probably refused to include a French translation in his newsletter. While Rafe struggled to process this, Karya leaned towards him. You're really separated from our world, eh? I guess, he replied uneasily. When he didn't continue, she hummed and asked, So, bitten or born? Excuse me? Sorry, is that rude? I don't know many werewolves. The word werewolves rattled around his skull. Bitten. Karya inhaled. That must have been terrifying. A little, Rafe said slowly. He'd never talked about it before. In the moment. Karya's big green eyes shone with curiosity, and Tony glanced over her shoulder as she cooked. I was 16, he continued, warming to the story, out camping with some friends. She was young, separated from her pack, and we scared her. She didn't mean to. He pushed up his left sleeve to show the puckered scar on his forearm. Afterwards, she found me, taught me how to manage it. She wanted me to join her pack, but you didn't, Karya surmised. Why not? Rafe picked idly at his nails. I wanted to go to school, get a job. I didn't want to be a monster, to be part of the pack. Karya studied him and then said, I'm sorry you had to go through that alone. I'm sorry you survived it alone. I'm surprised you survived it alone, Tony added. He shrugged. Not much danger for someone like me. Not physically, maybe, she returned.
Wonderful. you, Erin. I'm somehow like not surprised that there's vampire feuds in Ottawa. But I feel the need to insert a joke about the LRT system. So I guess it's just like which side
Yeah,
controls their trains.
in retrospect, that is perhaps a missed opportunity.
Ah, but you said it's a new work, so you can always go back and add it in. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Did we get any response for our game? What are some of our contributions?
Did we ever? People have been posting birthday books for the entire time. So we have about 100, such as the 5th birthday, so long and thanks for all the birthdays, an unkindness of birthdays. The long birthday. Oh, here's a good one. No, go ahead.
From Twitter, we got, I have no birthday and I must scream.
Oh, that would be sad. The well-known classic, The Birthday, as well as its much longer sequel, The Lord of the Birthdays.
Of course, The Birthday Manifesto as well. We want to move outside of genre works. Wow. Well, that was wonderful. See, and I think it's just a testament to how creative this community is. I love it. And I think it's hard to believe how far we've all come in the last 2 years. I mean, I did some math, which was a lot for me, and we've had over 100 different authors and artists.
Wow. We have been nominated for the Aurora twice, 2 years running.
And we've all of us made this really great community, both in person and online. So as we look to the year ahead, like, what do you wish for Ephemera? From the serious to the silly, we want to hear your Ephemera birthday wishes.
Themes or readers or activities or hopes, put them in the YouTube chat and tell us on Twitter.
And I'm very pleased to introduce our final reader tonight. Pamela Rentz is a paralegal specializing in legal support for tribes and tribal organizations. In 2018, she attended the Clarion West Writers Workshop. She has published short fiction in Asimov Science Fiction, Apex Magazine, and Fantasy Magazine. And she has self-published 5 romance novels, including a 4-book urban native series under the pen name Pamela Sanderson. Welcome so much, Pamela. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you. So I was actually at Clarion West in 2008. So I'm an old timer. You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, thanks again for having me and congratulations on 2 years. And so I'm a citizen of the Karuk tribe and my home place is in Northwest California on the Klamath River. But right now I live on the lands that are the homeland of the Chinook and the Cowlitz tribes. So, and I'm going to read a little something about saving Indigenous languages. This week, Lucy planned to translate the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Are you sure about this one? Frankie said. Her grandson had books and papers spread all over the table. Streets that follow like a tetanus instrument? It makes no sense. Tedious argument, Lucy said. The way you say it, of course it doesn't make sense. I mean, Michelangelo? Frankie gave her a pleading look. Just think, while Michelangelo was painting the Sistine Chapel, our ancestors hiked around these woods hunting deer. They stood on the same river rocks we have now, dipping salmon. No cars, no airplanes, no phones. She waggled her fingers at the device in his hands and frowned until he put it away. He had such a hard time being serious. She continued, our glorious mountains thick with trees. Our people back then couldn't even imagine Michelangelo existed. Thinking about it made her feel warm and alert. Frankie stared at the paragraph in front of him, his face grim. Michelangelo couldn't imagine them either, he grumbled. We don't know that, Lucy said. They sat in the smallest classroom in the administration building. The table could fit 6, but again, it was just the 2 of them. The room was stuffy, the only window painted shut. The place smelled of coffee and neglect. This is impossible, Frankie said. I'm all tiny on doing this on paper. She patted the pages. Keep at it. It doesn't have to be perfect. Lucy returned to her own work, the paragraph printed in block letters on the page. She liked to look at the poem and let the words float in her consciousness as she fell into a traditional mindset. The Karuk language had its own rhythm and emphasis, simple words chained together. These words and phrases created a new shape for the poetry. Frankie squirmed in his seat. He was never going to see the wonder for himself if he didn't suffer through the hard part. This particular poem had a plodding and heavy-handed boldness about it, but the translation was complex and heady. The Karuk words felt good, scraping off the back of her mouth. Before the taking of a toast and tea, Frankie read from his sheet. What words would you do for toast? Frankie, Lucy stared at him over the top of her glasses. You're here to help, not hinder. You're hindering. There are only so many choices. Go with the best one. Got it, Frankie said. The room was silent except for a quiet pop from the fluorescent lights and his pencil tapping on the page. He pushed it away and took out a little notebook and wrote rapidly, something that couldn't possibly be their translation. When he saw her staring, he said, got an idea for my own poem. You're a poet? A rap artist. He paused thoughtfully, chewing the end of his pen. What about our translation? She didn't want to discourage him, but she needed him to understand. We're at the end now. The Karuk language dies if we sit back and rest. Who even sees these? Frankie asked. We do. No offense, Grandma, but people want to hear someone speak our language. I see a deer. The river is rising. Yo, check out those ripe acorns. They don't want to sit around translating dead white guy poems. Lucy felt a spark of indignation. When I recite the translated poem, here she gave him a stern look, people are hearing me speak. But this one is too hard to even understand, even in English. What is this guy about? Lift and drop a question on your plate. Here, Frankie sat up and made a face of comic confusion. Lucy sat back, the plastic seat hard and unforgiving under her tired old bones. She was too old and creaky to effectively storm off, plus she needed Frankie to drive her home. She struggled to explain. It's not just about hearing words, she said. It's what you can do with the language. People think it's primitive, some ancient thing from a long time ago. How old is this poem? Frankie asked. Lucy took the paper back and stuck it in her folder. Hard as it was to hear, Frankie was right. They were the only ones at translation class. They were always the only ones at translation class. No one would hear this poem when it was finished. Don't be mad, Frankie said. I'm not mad, I'm disappointed, Lucy said. Maybe there's another way, Frankie said. There was a sound, like keys in the door. They both looked up. A councilwoman everyone called Pugs stuck her head in the door. Lucy, hi. Before they could say anything, Pugs backed out. It's in use, she hollered over her shoulder as the door clicked closed. We almost got someone, Frankie said. It took a moment, but Lucy laughed. I see what you're saying. How do you think we get people in here? Frankie pointed at his poem. Rap, he said. Rap, Lucy repeated. You're going to rap in Karuk? Frankie grinned. No, English. I got some friends and we're always brainstorming ideas, looking at beats, for fun. I see, Lucy said, wishing she had something encouraging to say. The door opened again and Pug said, Are you about done? Sure thing, Lucy said as she gathered up her things. I hear you're translating classic poetry. Anything I would know? Pug smiled that bland smile that elected officials use when they pretended to look interested. Doubt it, Frankie said. T.S. Eliot? Pugs's face didn't change. So glad to see the program is a success. Lucy bristled with quiet fury, but took her cane when Pugs handed it to her. Keeping the language alive, Lucy said pleasantly. Frankie barely said a word as he drove her home and helped her into the house. He brought in some firewood and rekindled the fire in her wood stove. Let's translate one of your raps, she said. I'm not sure how that will work. Why not? You can use words from both. People want to hear someone speak our language. Frankie thought for a moment before he took his notebook out. Okay, let's try it.
No, that was wonderful, Pam. Thank you so much. So I came across Pam's work earlier this year in Apex magazine, and I was really struck by just the wit in your prose, the wit and just the snap to your dialogue. I think I recalled saying, like, this should be on stage, and this was a great example of that.
Thank you. Glad you liked it.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. What a wonderful way to wrap up the evening. I'm trying to find my place here. Did we get any birthday wishes for Prancy?
Of course we did.
Okay,
We have
well,
wishes for themes of invisibility and beneath. And we have a wish to see our third birthday, which I have said in chat is very likely because we have funding for another year, which is
Yay.
extremely exciting. Thank you, the OEC.
Unless something goes terribly wrong.
Yeah, it would have to go terribly wrong. Is there anything on Twitter?
Yes, I wish for us to book the well-known author, actor, and model Guinness the cat.
If he's available. I know we'd have to go for the agent. And speaking, he's probably pretty high, but
luckily, I'm pretty sure we have the same agent.
Oh, that's good. Kim May. Oh, another wish. I wish for everyone to be able to partake in those lovely collie bites from Glad Day again.
Yeah, I like all these wishes. It sounds like they're wishes for us to keep going as a community. Yeah, and no birthday would be complete without some cake. So let's all focus on those wishes really, really hard. Everyone, there, we can see it. Yeah, it's a little too. So focus on your wishes. And in 1, 2, 3. Yay! Happy birthday, Ephemera!
Happy birthday, us! And all of you.
And
before we finish, we do actually have one more surprise for you. For Prancy's second birthday, we got something very, very exciting.
We got, really, it's a gift for all of you as well.
Yes.
We got a new website. What? So it's ephemeraseries.org. I hope people can see it. Can people see it?
Yeah, I can see it. I think
Excellent.
Everybody should be able to see it.
So you can see it's got our events and it's got our past events. So you can go and you can look at them all. There's a lot of them that we've had. You can see about us and what we do. And look, there's us. And that's cool. And our code of conduct is there. So when we have new people coming to Ephemera, it's super easy to find and it's all there. And yeah, now you can get in touch with us. And yeah, so our new online home, if you're looking to catch up with us, we'll still be on Twitter and Facebook, of course. But yeah, ephemeraseries.org.
Also very thankful to the OEC for the money for this one and to Clockpuck Studios who made this very beautiful website. So exciting when we first saw this a couple weeks ago.
It is gorgeous, and I think entirely us and our aesthetic.
Extremely, yeah.
So yeah, we're really pleased. And look, that's tonight. So you can also see the people that are going to be on Ephemera. Yeah, so that's our big birthday surprise. So thank you, all of you, very much for coming. Thank you to our readers, and until next time, don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Ephemera Series or on our website, ephemeraseries.org. And please subscribe to this YouTube page. We'd like to thank the Toronto Arts Council, the Ontario Arts Council, and the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America for their funding assistance. And as we close out tonight, we'd like to thank our fabulous readers, our awesome performer, our composer, Alex White, our friends, our families, our loved ones, and you. Thank you for staying with us through these 2 years. We will see you for our next event on December the 15th, right here on YouTube. Good night. Bye.